Flawed but inspired, it remains one of my favorite films and certainly one I expect to wear the DVD out someday. I pop it in so much. Let's get into it. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the show. It is, in fact, Saturday, and it is, in fact, super. Therefore, it must certainly be Super Saturday, the show where we discuss all things super and awesome. And today, we're digging out a DVD from my collection that I have every intention of wearing out. I watch so often Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. Now, I'm going on the assumption here the audience is aware of Lord of the Rings. Big leap, I know. But also the folks are at least tentatively aware of the animated Lord of the Rings film from 1978. If you haven't been exposed to this gem, you are missing out. So go get yourself a copy. It's dirt cheap. There's no reason not to at least expose yourself to it. Wait, that came out wrong. Or did it? Oh. Anyway, Ralph Bakshi, whom you all might be familiar with such works as the infamous Fritz the Cat, Heavy Traffic, Coonskin, Wizards, American Pop, Hey Good Lookin', Fire and Ice, Cool World, and Spicy City, became exposed to The Lord of the Rings back in the 50s while working at Terry Tunes. Not even 7 years later, he's convincing everyone who listened to him that it would be perfect as an animated film. Now, there's part the first of this meeting of confused and convoluted factors that led to this film being made. Moving on to part the second, we zoom in on United Artists who, in 1969, a great year, had acquired the rights for making a Lord of the Rings film. They had just trashed a script by Peter Shaffer, and film producer Dennis O'Dell was shopping around trying to find someone to make the thing. They went through David Lean, Stanley Kubrick. Man, can you imagine a Stanley Kubrick Lord of the Rings? That would be bizarre. But Michelangelo Antonini, and finally settled on John Borman. Borman's script was deemed too expensive and it was abandoned, which was fine because he went on to make Deliverance in 72 and then a personal favorite of mine, Excalibur, in 81. Somehow, Bakshi had heard Borman's script was abandoned. He then made it a point to pester United on a yearly basis to give him the go-ahead with his own version. Bakshi had a convincing argument, though. When he had learned Borman had intended to squash the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy into a single movie, he commented, "I thought that was madness. Certainly a lack of character on Borman's part. Why would you want to tamper with anything Tolkien did?" So Bakshi certainly seemed to have some reverence for the material, and that's important in making Lord of the Rings, as it should be with most things, but I digress. There's also information out there indicating Bakshi only wanted to make the film because his recent work of Coonskin had tanked, and he thought the revenue from a Lord of the Rings film could save his studio. Personally, I don't see why both things can't be true. But moving on. It took Bakshi until 75 before he convinced United executive Mike Medavoy to produce 2 or 3 animated films along with a prequel to The Hobbit. Medavoy offered Bakshi Borman's script, which Bakshi rejected. And what happens next is murky, but it ended up the film would not move forward without the Borman script, which ended up costing $3 million back in the 70s. You'd think Borman would be happy with $3 million, but in actuality, Tolkien had once written to Borman, please Borman was going to do the adaptation live action. So Borman was unhappy about Bakshi doing the films animated as he'd been given the de facto nod by Tolkien himself. To counterpoint, Bakshi received Tolkien's daughter Priscilla's blessing. And would Tolkien himself disapprove of animation? One wonders. Now, MGM was the studio going ahead with this, and it was Dan Melnick behind it. Melnick got canned in 76, and the new guy, Dick Shepherd, hadn't read the books, knew nothing about it, and thought the entire film was about a wedding. Which I guess, Aragorn and maybe, but whatever. So Bakshi reached out to Zal Zentz to produce, and Zentz agreed. Bakshi initially handled the script himself. However, a guy he hired to do research, Chris Conkling, started offering treatments and scripts as the two collaborated. Eventually, this didn't pan out, and Bakshi and Zenz hired Peter S. Beagle, who tossed out all the changes Conkling had suggested and just went with the straight story. Well, as much as could be squeezed into a film, understandably. Some of the changes made were they condensed the journey from Bag and Debris. A bunch of stopovers are omitted, like the whole Tom Bombadil thing, which I myself may or may not skip over in my yearly reading of The Lord of the Rings. And of course, the Barrow Dens encounter as well, because that feeds right into the Tom Bombadil thing. So they did cut a few things. Bakshi turned to rotoscoping for the animation. That's the act of animating over a live action sequence, then doing some voiceovers if necessary, which was the case here. Bakshi's intent, which he's been lauded for in books like The Animated Movie Guide by Jerry Beck, was to present the thousands of combatants in big epic battles more realistically than had been done by entities such as Disney. Bakshi would later regret his extensive use of rotoscoping, but honestly, it's just another technique. It's a marriage between live action and animation, and I felt the quality of the film presented speaks for itself, but that's just my opinion, so moving on. Now, originally, Bakshi wanted music to be done by none other than Led Zeppelin, which would have rocked. But Zenz shot that down as he wouldn't be able to put the music from Zeppelin on his Fantasy Records label. Clearly not seeing the profit potential of such a legendary rock band, Zenz's decision would generously be called short-sighted. They went with Leonard Rosenman for a more orchestral score. Some have criticized the man's work as being more middle ground for his catalog, but sitting here right now, recording this video, I can conjure up in my mind the exact soundtrack itself across the entire movie. So I personally would not call it middle ground. I would call it memorable. Okay. The film itself was a big success. Budget estimates range from 4 million upwards of 12 million to make, but it made over 30 million, so it was absolutely a success. In spite of that, rabid hardcore Tolkien fans just attacked the film for various reasons and minutiae, and not including this, doing that, blah blah blah. And they're just refusing to enjoy it for what it was. Critics settled on a description of flawed but inspired, and that's probably fair. What piece of work isn't flawed in the grand scheme? I mean, you won't see me defend the Balrog in this, even if I still love the film. Regardless of confusing online interviews and comments, Bakshi's film clearly influenced Jackson's live action ones. I continue to see it as homage, and nothing more drama worthy than that, regardless of evolving comments. Bakshi had intended for there to be at least one more film in his adaptation. When United refused to put Part 1 in the tagline for the movie, as they felt nobody would show up to watch the first part in an epic, Bakshi was furious. Compound onto that he never received the budget he needed for the first film and all the problems he ran into, making the film the most stressful of experience of his life. The rabid attacks by the Tolkien hardcore crowd, he opted out of doing any further films. And when Bakshi was out, the entire notion of a sequel fell by the wayside. For several years, I thought the Rankin Bass Return of the King was the sequel, but in researching this video, it seemed Rankin Bass was already doing their own movies going on the side, and they had nothing to do with Bakshi's, but perhaps capitalized on things after Bakshi was out, something like that. All this being said, is this an enjoyable film? Heck, yes, it is. Like I said, I watch it often, several times a year, just like the live action ones. Just touching briefly on my own impressions, I prefer many of the character presentations, voice and otherwise, in the animated to the live action, but and it is important to listen to the but here. I think both films do a wonderful job on that front, and this is just a point of preference, and a tiny one at that. For example, the costumes in the live action are far and away more immersive and cool in the live action, but I prefer all the Hobbit voices and the models in the animated to the live action. It's just a minor preference. The one hill I will die on is that I found the Nazgul in the animated film light years more creepy and terrifying. the voices and the subsequent roars are superb. Love it. It's so creepy. And all the trippy background art when Frodo slips into the shadow world. Chef's kiss. But then you have the animated Balrog, which you will never hear me defend. The live action is obviously like, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah. Plus, Jackson's set pieces and locations are breathtaking. I mean, I like the paintings and the animated version, but I mean, just you just look at this, the New Zealand landscape repurposed. I mean, it's just it's amazing. But I could go on all day. But this video has gone on long enough. The live action movies cover way more ground than Bakshi's could and present the most immersive and enjoyable experience to date. But the animated film, for all its flaws, did some really amazing work, and I will defend it to my dying day. So there it is, folks. 1978's Lord of the Rings by Ralph Bakshi. A flawed but fascinating and enjoyable film that never seems to be brought up when discussing, Lord of the Rings media. And I felt it deserved a spotlight here on Super Saturday, as I maintain it is both super and awesome. That's all I've got today, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. Give me a moment of your time. I appreciate you. And welcome to all the new faces to the channel. Glad to have you here on this journey here on YouTube. Now, it is a beautiful Saturday. So get out there. Go watch yourself some cartoons. Keep the tradition alive. Make sure you get out and enjoy some of this cool weather. Finally, and while you're at it, pop in a good movie, read a comic, roll some dice, make some memories, and as always, have a good one.